Hi guys, today I'm so excited to be introducing you to B Go. If you don't know her already, she is a sports journalist who formerly worked for Rappler, one of the biggest sports news organizations in the Philippines, very well known outside the Philippines as well, which was founded by the first Nobel Peace Prize winner from the Philippines. And it's just such a joy to speak with B because she's just full of the love of the Lord. She talks about this period during COVID where she really felt God pruning her and exposing and ridding her of some long standing strongholds in her life, and just how she has been walking in faith and gone freelance and going to Bible college and traveling for her freelance work to do more sports media things. And I just think that it's an episode that hopefully you'll really enjoy watching, listening to, and just really remembering, God has made us who we are. And, for some of us, like B, we are ambitious, we are go getting. But amidst all of the goals, there's nothing more important than letting God lead, abiding in Him, and just trusting that He writes a story better than anything we could possibly imagine. So I hope you really enjoy this episode with B today. And here we go. Hi, B. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Jenny. Nice to finally meet you. I'm so excited to chat with you.
Me too. So I've been following your career on Instagram for I think just over a year, and it's so awesome to see how God has moved in your life. So I was just wondering if you could start us off, how did you get into the field of sports journalism?
Yeah, so hi, I'm Beatrice Go, but then people do call me B. That's my nickname. And yes, my profession is I'm a freelance sports journalist and a researcher now. And how I got into the field is because I was also a competitive swimmer when I was much younger as well. So I started off as an athlete, and then it's just so funny how I landed into media, news and publishing because I just wanted to join the high school newspaper, the org with my friends because every one of my friends wanted to join. And I was like, FOMO. I was just like, I want to get in too. So that's why I signed up for the paper. I auditioned and wow, I did get in. And then when I was in college, I was also part of the varsity swim team. And then when I was a rookie, I had a senior member who was part of the college newspaper this time. And every day in training, he would be like, join the guidon. Oh my gosh, you're right. Join the guidon. I was one of those girls who would be like, no, I have to focus on both swimming and academics only. I might not have enough mental capacity for another organization. But then this guy was just like, no, you can do it. It's gonna be so fun and all that. So and so eventually, when I decided that I wanted to join, you know how you could kind of get competitive. I could kind of get competitive, and I was like, I have to make sure that I get into the organization. I was gonna sign up for feature writing at first, which was headed by my eventual best friend in my company later on. But then I saw that her line was so long. It was just like, oh, look, sports. Not that much people. So I lined up and I guess I got in also. I don't know if it was a good thing or a bad thing. Maybe I wasn't the top choice, but then they had no other choice but to get me. But then, everyone has to start somewhere. I definitely wasn't the best one out there, but then I for 4 years I just kept going, and then until my last year in university I became the sports editor of that publication. And then I guess that's where I started to cover all these sports, and then and there was just so much favor there. So I guess that's how the trajectory and my humble beginnings came about.
That's so cool. I mean, I love that. I feel like God used people to encourage you to pursue a direction. And then in our lives, isn't it so true that something that seems so random, it's just like no one is going out for sports, I might as well do it. It's like these funny ways that God will direct us into new paths. And so could you tell us about how your career has evolved since then? Maybe some God markers in addition to the ones from high school?
Definitely. Like, I don't think anyone would have ever imagined that I'd become a journalist just because, like, number one, I was actually a business major. And then all my life, like, we have a family business back at home, and I'm the only, like, daughter who could actually, like, manage it in the future. So everyone actually thought that maybe, like, oh, she's gonna go, like, the FMCG route or, like, the corporate, in then eventually work for that family business kind of thing. Like all these people have these thoughts and how my future would like evolve and go. But then I think that's where God really like had to interject and like break all those like what thoughts thought that people had about me and my future. So the God marker started actually when I was going like how I landed my job in Rappler, which is an independent news organization in the Philippines, and it's also headed by Maria Ressa, who's a Nobel Peace Prize laureate. So um yeah, like it was crazy. So on the year that I was going to graduate, there was like this job post about Rappler looking for a sports writer, and that was January. And at that point, I totally ignored it because I was also in that thought bubble that I don't really have a chance. I'm not even a communications graduate. I don't have all these qualifications, and this might not even be the path that my parents wanted for me. So I totally ignored it in January. But then come April of that year, 2017, the managing editor of Rappler actually like sent an email now directly recruiting from my university for a sports writer because you could imagine that wow, in 4 months they haven't really found anyone. So I kind of felt that like, hey, it means something that they're actually recruiting internally. So I applied for it, and then I got an interview, and then with my sports editor back then, he actually hired me on the spot, gave me a job offer, and I was like, no way, like what? I haven't even graduated, then I got the job. So I guess that's like one marker that, when God opens a door, like it's really just gonna flow so smoothly and so easily. And then the more recent one, I guess, for like the evolution, because while I was in Rappler, since 2017 to 2022, I was really able to cover the big competitions already, like the Asian Games, Southeast Asian Games, and even the Tokyo Olympics, though remotely. But then, just to be for context, like to be able to cover those competitions at my age, like I started when I was 22 years old in the Asian Games. Usually it's dominated by all these veteran reporters, but then God really gave me a chance through Rappler to be able to cover all these events, have all these like veteran experiences. So the growth was, I had to like kind of catch up, and well, thankfully with God's grace that I was able to keep up with his pace, right? So that's where I saw a lot of favor also with my career. And I guess most recently, like, when I was about to leave Rappler, because I was actually praying to God for a vision as well, because I'm just like, hey, like I feel like a fork road is coming, whether like should I really go family business or should I just continue on. And as I prayed for a vision, God actually gave me one in the latter. So it's just still staying the course of like this of the media industry. And once I even like pull the trigger and just left my first job, there was just so much favor in the career path. Freelancing, everyone was like, oh, so you're betting on yourself now. But then
Yes.
like I guess like it's all God, like I really just saw how like I've met like the kindest and smartest people along the way this year. They have become such super helpful mentors, and I just believe that there's just more impact and just more purpose that I can make in the media industry. And when it comes to fork roads also, one question that you'd want to ask is like, oh, where would God be able to use you more? Where will you grow the most with God? And
Mhm.
I really believe it was in this path. So, I just really took the leap of faith and trusted
Amazing.
him here.
I love the confidence that comes when you talk about your decision making because I feel like it's so clear that you've come to this place because you've walked with God through the decision making process. And now maybe there are still some unknowns, like there always are in life, but you are walking in this belief that you're on the path God has for you. And so I was wondering for maybe some listeners who aren't used to making decisions with God. Like, could you tell us about how you started to do this and even like asking for a vision? Like, I think that's so amazing, and it's a way that God can really encourage our faith that we can go closer to Him when He speaks to us in these ways. But could you tell us about your experience of, yeah, starting to rely on God in your decision making?
Definitely. And for context, I just feel like sometimes I'm still like a baby Christian as well. Or when I made that decision, I was still a baby Christian. I was a Christian over the pandemic. Like I only got planted in my first ever church right before the pandemic, but then the purge was real. Like I can talk about it later on how God's purging of like how he purged like those that nature of relying on yourself so much, because I think I grew up that way. Like I just had to rely on my own strength, but then I just felt that God would really show you practical signs also. So when I left Rappler, it was really like I really tried everything, all those tips. Like I'm the type of person who gives so many second chances. So I asked like, I asked for the normal things. Like I asked for a raise. I asked like, what else I can do here, like, in order to grow. So, leading up to that point, I really exhausted everything. And I was like, okay, there's really no more room for growth. But then I guess like the faith aspect came when I actually wasn't prepared to leave like the company, like financially, because everyone would always say that, before you leave the company, you have to have like 4 months worth of savings, like something like that. But really like the risk, that was the risk that I took. I wasn't really that prepared. Like I wasn't intentionally saving up for a move, right? So I just left. And I guess like, because it really felt like a sign. It was also like signs, like practical signs from God that like, hey, it's really your time. You just have to obey. So actually, like I submitted my resignation letter December 28th, around that time. But then like by January 24, I really got like an offer of my next move. And that was right before I left. I officially left Rappler on February 1. So I was like, wow, God, you really pulled through. And it all just came at the right time. So I think like a good word for it is just like, it's actually just holding on to God and trusting Him that even in every decision that you make, like, He's gonna be with you.
Yeah, amen. Obedience is like such an act of faith because you're not sure where it's leading. And so Rappler is obviously a very big company, very established, very well known. And then you went freelance, which, has less stability in some ways. Do you think going freelance has made you rely more on God? And if so, how?
Yeah, definitely. So what I tell people is just like, wow, freelancing, God is your boss.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it really made me unlearn the spirit of striving, because throughout the year, so I had all these opportunities, but then like you would know, and I could feel in my spirit which ones are really from God, and it's really the ones from God that has been tremendously blessed versus the ones that I actually acquired on my own strength. For context, is even right now what I'm doing for the Australian Broadcasting Corporation's Women in Youth and Sport program. So that was actually that freelance job that I got in January, and I've still been doing it now. Like, I'm not paid like monthly. I'm actually paid daily. But then God has like been blessing me like, okay, this is what you do. Everyone's figuring things out, but it's okay. I have it under control. That's what I really feel from him. And there were also ones that I really tried to acquire on my own strength, and really like it just left me so burnt out, just so unhappy also. So I was just like, okay, God, like I know that it, especially now that I'm in Favor College also, which is the Bible college of Favor Church in Manila. So he has called me to stay focused on Favor College. Like this is the jar that you have to offer as well. Before that, I had so many doubts, like, really, is it for me? Is it for me? But then, like, you know, as I obeyed also and just stuck with it, like, okay, my focus is I'm going to study. But then God has really provided me financially also, like with jobs that are actually comfortable, and really it just fits my schedule so perfectly. I was like, wow, God, this is really from you. I'm so blessed. I'm just so grateful.
Yeah, that's so amazing. And so as you're speaking, I'm just thinking about like the like biblical principle of multiplication. Like God entrusts to us talents and then we are expected to multiply them. What's your thought now that you've been through seasons where you have struggled with striving, like many of us have, and then learning to rely on God as you go through Favor College and other things? How do you balance wanting to be really ambitious for God with also wanting to take Sabbath and rest and abide in God?
So actually, in our first term of Favor College, we do a Christian disciplines course. So the Christian discipline I actually picked was Rule for Life. It just means that, you know, there are just things, you know, we are limited human beings as well. Like we have to recognize that, we have to humble ourselves to that fact that we can't do everything all at once as well. If we just, but then we have to put order also into our life, like the kingdom order as well. So I picked Rule for Life, and that allowed me to always like weekly write down my focus of the week, for example. And usually like as a freelancer also, like you have the capacity, or like it allows you to kind of say yes to everything. But then with Rule for Life, I was just like, okay, like I'm only gonna do these three things in the week as well. So when I started out, I was actually recovering from a lot of sicknesses. So the first one I had to put was like definitely focus on my health. So that allowed me to show up for my weight training, do tennis to actually move around also. And then the second one was just like, for example, like I have this I have to prepare for this presentation. Yeah, this is it. And then the third one is like, okay, gotta do my assessments as well for Favor College. And then so my mentor in that course would be like, yes, B, that's really good. That's good to be on track, that you're only focusing on three things. And then of course and that gives you actually more time for intimacy with God. Like just my devotional times ever since I started Favor College has really been so good. Like I mean, like in the pandemic, because I guess in the pandemic it's like the only thing you do is it gives you so much space to do devos. Like I could spend the whole like 2 hours, 3 hours just like talking to God. But then it's so different coming out of the pandemic. Like, you know, life is happening. So where will you, sometimes you'd ask yourself like, where would you put back your intimacy with God? So definitely I worked on it. Like discipline really allowed me to like abide in him, because that was the intention that I really want to abide in your spirit as well. And you know, when the thought of like, if I could actually just do everything all at once, like my pace will be much better, like I'm gonna improve faster. But then, you know, God does not work in a rush as well. So I was just like, okay, I believe that things will just really come in your time, Lord. So Rule for Life has just taught me to surrender that part of myself to
Yeah.
God.
I love that. Like, God knows how He made us. He knows, like, what we're like. And He knows, if we're the type of person who, if we want to do more, we'll rely on ourselves and have less time with Him because we want to be more productive. And so He, like, also throws us, like, challenges and, like, tests here and there, right, to make sure that we're relying on Him and He's guiding us like a good father. So I love your answer there. And I think you touched on exercise a little bit earlier. And so you're not only a sports journalist, but you love to work out daily. I think it says on your website. Like, dude, tell us about your thoughts on how we can like glorify God by keeping our bodies healthy as well. Sometimes as Christians, I think we focus so much on the spiritual health and development, which is of course essential, but also taking care of our bodies can also be a form of worship, I think.
Yes, I totally agree with you on how taking care of your bodies could be a form of worship because like in my head actually it's more of like I'm doing so much work, so I'm juggling multiple roles in the industry, like I get assigned to different projects, different articles, different researches. Then I also have my ministry, like so I lead in the young adults ministry of Favor Church. So it's like a lot of work. My pastor would say that your career, what you do outside of church and what you do in church, that is considered under one bracket as work. So how are you? So for me, like I'm just so intentional that I have to stay healthy in order to serve the people in both ministry and in the industry. So I guess that's why I also plan my workouts. And sometimes the hustler in me also in work also bleeds into working out. Before I used to just do everything to like just break the sweat, and like I have to reach this amount of calories, something like that. I used to be that like disciplined, but then once I got a personal coach, and she would always say that, hey, actually, like taking time to do like mobility and rest days are super important, and sleep is also very important. So I would track my sleep. So, and I also got sick, right? I actually was diagnosed with vertigo in July, and it was caused by irregular sleeping habits, just because when I was adjusting to the life in ministry as well, like I really tried to be so relational, so extroverted that, I would come home so late, wake up so early, and it just like totally burned me out as well. So that's how, like, that's how we could honor our bodies also. So it's working out to release those endorphins. Then to sleep is so important. And it's just because like we want to like serve others better. You don't want to see me cranky, like, as I lead you, or you don't want me to be so impatient as well. So, yeah.
When you said cranky, I just smiled because yesterday my brother sort of nudged me like, that was kind of mean. And I was like, was it? But he was right. But it was because when we don't sleep enough, when our days are longer, it's just the way our bodies work. Like we need rest. And when we don't get rest, we can get cranky. And then we're not necessarily treating people the way that we would want to when we're more rested. And so it all comes together in God's perfect formula of how we should live our lives. And I also wanted to pick your brain about how you stay organized, because you do so many things and you want to fit in exercise and you want to get enough sleep. Like, how do you personally structure your time? Do you use any apps, like any productivity tools?
So I actually use I still use a physical planner, guys. So I use the Hobonichi cousin. And the reason why I still use a physical planner is that my whole career, my whole life is actually still on like social media. So sometimes like it's by like reflex that you go to Instagram instead of your actual planner, your actual Google Calendar, that feeling. So that's why I was like, okay, I still gotta it's not for everyone, but for me, I have to keep my life separate in a planner. So I'm not like those intense bujo kind of geek, like I can be geeking on a lot of things, but I don't have mental capacity to actually like draw out my planner, right? So I at least listing down the things that I have to do. And I do sometimes do the Kanban method also, especially in terms of like my assessments, to just track the deadlines and break down each task in one project into specific tasks. So that, and color coding and highlight using different highlighters also for every project I do, it really helps. So for me, like, people are like, oh, you're so organized, like, are you really into it? But then I'm actually organized out of need, because I'm just
Yeah.
like, really, my life is like it can get messy in an instant. So that's why I use planners. And so important also when I use and tracking is so important for me. Or I learned that the discipline of tracking can just it can bear fruit. So especially when you're tracking your finances, so, and expenses, that was really important as I went freelance also. So, like, just tracking where my money comes in, because now it comes in from multiple places. And like, I do different work for different companies. And then also, like, my expenses, like, it's a different life stage now, a different season after the pandemic. So your expenses do increase. So I really believe that, like, putting actual structure, and at least some structure, but you don't let the structure dictate your life. It's more of like the structure is just going to complement and help your life. So I think that's the balance that people actually need too.
Finances. This was not on our list of questions to be discussed, but I think Christian finances is something that we don't necessarily talk about a lot. Like, we do talk about tithing. But in our pre-conversation, we're talking a little bit about sometimes we can pick up like a poverty spirit where we feel like we shouldn't or we don't deserve like to have more. But then money itself is not bad. It's the idolization of money is bad. But when we, have more resources, we can also sow into the kingdom. But do you have thoughts on, now that you're freelancing and obviously you are an ambitious person, you love goals, you want to do things as best as you can for God. How do you think about finances and pray about finances and saving and like keeping all that as a form of worship rather than like a form of selfishness, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, so when I started freelancing, actually, my first type as a freelancer, I was so happy. I was like, God, could finally give more than the peanuts that I've been giving, because my salary was so low in my previous job and all that. So actually, like, so now I hang on to that joy that as I earn more, and hopefully in the future I also do like earn more, that I'm just able to, like, as you said, sow it into the kingdom. Like, I find joy in tithing as well, because I know that it's really going to reach so many people, just like thinking about, like, oh, how many salvations are going to be made as well. And of course, like, the big idea is that everything that's given to you right now, it's actually God. So you're just giving the 10% back to him, right? So when it comes to finances as well, I guess as a freelancer, as someone in the Philippines, there's more challenges in actually, like, filing your taxes. I guess for context, in the Philippines, it's actually a difficult process also. You have to go through, like, so many government offices, and then it gets really complicated. Like, sometimes, like, you reach there, the system's down. So, and actually the Bible would also say that you have to submit to the authority of your country, right? So knowing that the context for the Philippines, there's just so much corruption, and it's not like other countries where you see where your taxes goes, but then that really trains your heart also of integrity as well. So one of the things that I worked on as well was, like, just securing, like, the business permits, and actually, like, doing things in process of the government, even though it's hassle, even like you don't understand it, but then just gotta do it because it's also in line with the Bible. And I guess in terms of what you want, right? Like, we're in different life stages. As we grow older, suddenly you just want many things. You want to buy many things. You want to invest and spend on many things. Like, I have also been making sure that I'm going to be aligned with God. Like, okay, God, like my friends have been asking me, like, do you want to go to this place? You want to travel here? Oh, do you want to start doing this sport? And I was like, okay, God, like, is this really what you want me to do in this season? Is this really how you want me to use the money that you have just given me? So I would just keep praying that I would also be aligned and I would feel where God's grace is like taking me also in the financial aspect.
Yeah, that's such good advice. So when you were speaking, I loved that you were talking about asking God what he has for you that season. I think God was just talking to me about this yesterday, and it was just such a beautiful reminder that there are so many options for us in the world. And yes, we can make our own decisions, but there's such wisdom and such joy in asking God, like doing X sport, great exercise, but will it distract you from what God is like putting on your plate this season? And then one of the things I want to ask you about was some of the Instagram posts that you wrote. I love your reflective posts because I feel like you really dig deep and you really share. And so just thinking about different seasons of life, like you had a post about reflecting on 2020 and how it felt like nothing was happening in that season, but it ended up being a setup for what God had next. Could you maybe share a little bit about that period?
Yeah, so 2020, that's where I started my Christian walk. And so I did say that I felt like nothing happened, but actually a lot happened. They were
Yeah.
just like not good or like really positive stuff that you just share. But then, you know, since it's my testimony, like I'm comfortable in sharing it. So this is where I talk about my purge. Like it just, you know, when I committed to God and they really say that, you know, the Christian walk isn't easy. Like your situation doesn't change when you commit to God, but then that it's you who changes. So that's what I went through. It was actually one of the most difficult periods of my life, like in general as well. It was like the dark room season. So that's where God really had to refine me. God had to purge me of like all the mindsets that I had from the world. Also 2020, the pandemic, there were no sports events. So many people in my industry lost their jobs, but you know, I was glad to hold on to mine. But of course, I had to pivot and be flexible as well in thinking of content. But then at the same time, I was dealing with a lot of my own personal problems. So that year, my mom was gonna go through chemotherapy, but then we didn't really have a good set of doctors. Like, you know, they actually went AWOL on her in the first month. And then it was just so difficult to the point that, you know, the chemotherapy didn't work and it just left a lot of my family less. And I got pushed to the point where I had to think about actually quitting my job just to take care of my family. I think like that was like the breaking point as well. And that's how much of a choice I didn't have. Like the situation has pushed me to that brink also. But then after that day, I remember I woke up and I was just like, okay, what do I do? But then I chose to press on, you know, just to keep my job also because aside from God, like that was the only physical certain thing that I have as well. So, and I didn't want to quit because of this reason. Like I'm just going through a super duper hard time. I know there are other ways as well. I know that I have a choice, but then that really pushed me to rely on God a lot because it was like my situation every day. You wake up to it's just like, wow, it's this again. Like, you know, that repetitive feeling. And at the same time, I knew in that season, I was also spiritually really unwell. It was just a lot of trauma and just a lot of anger that God really had to purge me through like the whole 2020 also. So I guess like that's what I could say about the start of my Christian walk, a baby Christian, but then it was a super uncomfortable period as well. And so like the only things that really the positives of that season though was just like that was the time that I was learning how to read the Bible. I was learning a lot from my pastors because our church really released a lot of online content, a lot of Zoom content, our connect groups, or that's what we call our small groups. We went online, and I was just so excited to show up to my small groups every single time. Like I knew that I had like perfect attendance in 2020. So that's what really kept me going. Just God and the community, and like just like growing my faith in him. So it was just a season that ended up being a period where I had to learn more about God and, actually patch up, or even like and know him in a different way, like have a relationship with him. And he used that period to also develop my character. And I guess like that's what I had to go through before he could use me for all just the great things that happened this year.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much for sharing. I mean, I feel like I've been through similar periods, and it is so not easy to be purged, but it can also be like the best season of your life in some ways because you surrendered and you saw God like heal and reveal. And ultimately, like, we all have brokenness, but we don't want to keep it, right? Like, we know that God heals and we can bring it to Him. And yeah, that whole process is so wonderful. And then something else that you mentioned, and I don't know if it's the same season or if it's a different season, but sometimes we can feel that God makes it easier for others. Like it seems so easy in their career and their relationships and this and that. Could you share about how you stay focused on God now and like avoid comparison as much as you can?
Yeah, so I guess comparison was one of the things that God had to deal in me as well, because I grew up in a comparison culture. It's typical Asian culture. I studied in a all girls high school as well, so you could imagine like the comments of like the of boys would be like, "Oh, she's so much prettier," and then like I'd receive like comments like, "Oh, she's smart. This your batch is not as smart as like this other batch," and and then this person is like, oh, she's so fit, she's so thin. And then as you grow older, it's like, oh, she just graduated and she's earning this much, she's earning so much more. And so a lot of these comments, like they could easily be framed to actually resent people instead of like celebrate them for who you are. And I think this is because a lot of people in the Philippines are not familiar with a God who actually just loves. So hence like all these comments, and there's just a lot of like shame culture as well. And another thing is because like I also grew up as an athlete, so there's always going to be that competitive nature in me as well. And there's always what you call healthy competition, healthy sportsmanship. But then for me, I wish that I was properly guided by like maybe someone Christian in learning how to deal with like this competitive nature that we have, because as an athlete there's always only going to be one winner. And when in my post about God making it easier for others, is because like when you're in sports, you'll be definitely grouped and bunched with like super talented people who are so athletic. Like they're just sometimes born that way. It's because of their genes as well. And what I hated the most is when I see people like not show up for training or cheat on their laps, but they still do well in competitions. And for me, I was just like, gosh, I show up every day. Like I train so hard, but then why am I not winning? Why am I not improving? So that really just discouraged me a lot as a young athlete. And then when you thought that you've dealt with it, like it actually manifests when I'm being as a journalist, because as a journalist, like you are pressured to like get all the scoops. You have to be the first one to release the story. But it's a good thing, like the media and the media community that I'm part of is actually like very pro about working together despite coming from different publications, just because as media we're trying to promote a cause. We all have different audiences as well. Like it's not like we're stealing like one another's audience as well, right? So I'm glad that I was part of like a community that really promote working together, helping one another. It's cool, like when we go to all these multi-sport competitions abroad, and we have to do all these interviews, right? So each of us will like interview a person and we'll transcribe it, then we'll just send it to each other in an email thread, which is really cool. And that's one side of a healthy media ecosystem, or a ecosystem in the workplace. And so those were the things that I struggled with. And to answer your question on how I'm able to overcome it. So the first one, definitely gratitude is really the antidote to comparison culture, because sometimes you realize that, there are many things that I have now that others don't have and are actually coveting. And then here am I coveting what other people want, right? So it's like, okay, God, like I'm just so grateful for the little things, and just to like even acknowledge how awesome things are going on for me. Like even on the bad days, like, I just feel like having a roof to live in, like just being able to wake up from my bed, just having like just being able to drive to favorite college, or even to just have the opportunity to take favorite college and the finances to do so. God, I'm just so grateful, and I feel like this is just so awesome, like just to be so content in that. And then the second one was like what I had to do for my Christian discipline, the rule for life, like knowing what you have capacity for. So it's like, okay, I only have really have grace for this thing that you want me to do, God. And I guess lastly is definitely intimacy with God, just asking God what to focus on, spending time in prayer, and even to ask and be so honest in what you actually want from him also. So I have all these testimonies also that, I just like told God, like, hey God, I know that this seems so superficial, ha 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 ha, and all that, but I actually want this, Then the next day, or sometimes it's just like, oh God, I got it. You're listening to me. So, those kinds of things, really just ask it from God, be completely honest with him. So that really just also enriches my relationship with God.
I love that. I love that joy when you talk about like the he God. I just really want this because it's really like father and child, right? It's like he knows you want it. You can tell him you want it, and he is God, right? He knows whether or not it's good for you or whatever, but he answers prayers. So it's been so awesome to hear about all God has been doing in your career. And I was wondering, that you were talking about like the importance of teamwork as you're working with fellow journalists. What would you say are the top 3 things that you have learned about being like a woman in leadership?
Character is definitely key. So, that's what I went through, like the purge, right, of like my character. But then it's like this year I realized how when you're a leader, you're really a role model to the people that you are leading. So it's so important for God to prepare your character first before the platform. And one thing that I've been holding on to also since maybe last year was just to be faithful with the little things that I have and stewarding well, because like, if we're faithful with the little, then that's when God was gonna give you more. That's what really pushed me to also like stay with Rappler until like February, because I was just, even though I felt it's like, the grace is running out in November, but okay, God, like you want me to be faithful with this, so I would do it. So it's that type of like character also, to just prioritize like integrity also, and the relationships that you've built also. You don't want to do things like do things selfishly also. So always just have others in mind. And the second is definitely a big thing that I learned from church. And in Favorite Church, we would always do people over process. So it's always like thinking about like how can we serve people better, and as a leader, it's more of like, how can I help them grow? How can I mentor and develop them, and actually like, get and draw out like the special things inside of them, unearth the gold that's inside of them. And also just and building relationships, because it's in building relationships where you're able to build trust with one another. Also, you're also able to lead better when your relationship with people is much better, even though we have a confronting culture as well. So we want to make sure that things are very clear, because clarity is kindness, and everyone just wants to make sure that expectations and all those other things, they're very clear cut as well. And just having the humility to also say sorry when you make mistakes, or sorry when you fell short in something. And I guess the last one definitely is to never let go of your relationship with God, even though like there are just so many things that's gonna happen, because as a leader, you'll just have so many responsibilities. You're not only responsible for the task, but then you're also responsible for people. But then it's really like I've learned this as well. Like I made a big mistake this year to actually like lessen, like devotional time, lessen my time with God, that it actually led me to a lot of burnout, then a lot of doubts also, and a lot of like the restless spirit, and I really felt like a mess also. So learning that God will always communicate to you on what you want to focus on. He's the one who refreshes you, gives you ideas, and he like loves on you so much that it allows you to be kind to yourself. And this love will definitely overflow to the people that you lead. So I guess those are the top 3 things of leadership that have been revealed to me, especially in this season.
Amazing. And then what about some maybe 3 things that you're praying about in this season of your life, whether it's for yourself or for your community or wider?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I've been praying for like the opportunities also for next year. Like I know that it's going to be a big year. There's always going to be exciting things that I'm just really praying for God to bless me with what he's been preparing me for as well. So that's like a personal prayer for mine. And but then my prayers for others, I just really pray for the workplace culture, that it's about taking care of people first. I'm a firm believer that your first social responsibility as a company is to take care of your employees first. I'm really passionate of like about companies who actually like are so intentional and actually care about your career and your development. So that's something that I really pray for here in the Philippines, because it's a lot of it's still very traditional, it's still very transactional. Other prayers for the Philippines is to just rebuke also the poverty spirit and the shame culture in the in the country, and also for like people who are hustlers like me, just for the spirit, the abiding spirit also in God.
Awesome. Love that. And maybe on that note, could you close us in prayer? Thank you so much for being here, B, and testifying and sharing with us all the wonderful things that God has done and is doing in your life and
Oh,
community.
oh, thank you, Jenny. Thank you for giving me this opportunity also. I have been a fan of your podcast since last year when I discovered it, and I've seen how it tremendously grew. And I read your testimonies on how you started out like you just want to just really talk about your faith, and you have been like such a testimony, like being part of that church media ecosystem. It's such a great ecosystem to be part of, and how you take care of your audience and your community also. It's really inspiring. Yeah.
Thank you. I feel like a theme in both of our lives is like one step at a time. Like you may not know the big picture, but we abide in God. We just take steps of faith, and God writes our story better than we ever could.
Yeah, I totally agree. Okay, let me close everyone in prayer. So, dear God, thank you so much for this opportunity, Lord, this time for me and Jenny to like speak to one another. Thank you also for the listeners who have just come across this podcast also, Lord. Like Lord, we just really pray that you'll be able to speak to them through us as well, or through our conversations, Lord. And I just really pray for those who are feeling like they're restless as well, Lord. But I just know that you're just going to meet them where they are as well, Lord. You're going to teach them how to abide, Lord. Lay out their next steps as well, Lord. And Lord, you're just going to fill them up with so much joy and peace with how much you can, with like just being your child as well, Lord. Like we just have to rest on that fact that we are already loved and accepted, and you just love us so much for who we are, Lord. You think that we're like the most awesome people as well. And Lord, you just really have a plan for each person here on earth as well. You have given them an exact call as well, Lord, and a purpose also. And it's really just the primary call to just follow you, Lord, and to trust you and to obey you. And I just really pray that everyone who just really takes an act of faith and risk things for you as well, that they are able to bear fruit, Lord, and that they'll also like be able to see and feel the inheritance that is just upon them already, Lord, that you have like set aside that inheritance for them, and they just really, and they don't have to strive, Lord. They don't have to do so much because, Lord, you are fighting their battles, Lord. And Lord, our battles are just fought on our knees as well, Lord. So I just really pray for those people who are in that season, Lord, in that season of waiting as well, Lord. I just really pray that breakthrough will come, Lord. You're just really going to show signs and just open doors for many people here, and you're just going to leave them astounded with things that are just beyond their imaginations, because they're from you, and you are all so great and so powerful and so awesome, Lord. So in Jesus' name we pray. Like I seal everything, just really praying for favor and blessing upon everyone. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, B.